Hello, Ioana, and welcome to Starting Remote. I'm so happy to be hosting you finally.
Hi, Julia. So happy to be here as well. I managed to get on the Enterprise and we are headed for Mars. Hope the connection will be fine, but very excited this is happening finally.
Even when they're going to Mars, they expect a bit of lags to happen as well. I think the longest would be like 30 minutes or something like this. I'm really happy because you wrote one of the papers on distributed work that is very, very dear to my heart. And that is unique as well, at least from everything else that I have read on distributed work. Your work during the PhD, I think it was a 7 years work and 7 years research, is really interesting because it talks about job promotion and what Borg and you call the virtual rat race.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you so much for the kind words. It means a lot because I think one of the greatest, wishes of a researcher is to have meaningful work, meaningful research. And yeah, I mean, we can take it as a 7 year. It was 3 years and a half during the PhD, and then another 3 years and a half in the postdoc. But the core started in the PhD, and that's the virtual rat race was coined in the PhD thesis. And yeah, Bo was totally on. This is a virtual rat race. We should call it the rat race in virtual worlds.
So, first of all, just to get everyone to know you better, can you tell us a few words about yourself and what led you to study distributed teams as well?
Sure. I mean, this is always hard, talking about yourself as a researcher, going out of your comfort zone. But I guess I am a researcher, trained as a quantitative researcher, and then through a chance of destiny, turned into a qualitative researcher. I was planning to do a field research, an experimental live research in a school company. And then one day to another, the person I was working with let me know he has to leave the company. And then that meant my entire experiment was gone. So I had like 1 week to figure things out. And it was like an emergency call with Dora and Bo and like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then we got another contact and he was only able to secure access to the company and give access to people and not do actually an experiment with those people. So then I went on and decided that I can pull this off. I can be a qualitative researcher. So I guess that's how I'm a researcher at core. Mixed methods, now mostly qualitative. I can see how being a quantitative researcher, you're more focused on the hypothesis and then testing it. But then with a qualitative researcher, you get to see things differently. You get to know why is that happening and how is that happening, and understanding. You can maybe follow up with a quantitative study, which I still maybe in the future will do, on on quantifying those things. So you get much deeper insight into people's lives and into their work on a day-to-day basis. So this entire PhD thesis probably would not have existed in this shape had it not been for the depth given by the qualitative research.
So, tell me a bit about the research.
Oh yeah, so how I actually got to study collaboration in distributed work was also because I had this kind of a feeling. It was back in 2012, and I was looking more in like what's there going to be and what's exciting, what's going on. And I had actually an interest in knowledge sharing. I thought knowledge sharing was a very important part of successful collaboration, and was, like probably many of us, excited to see that Google and Facebook are taking this knowledge sharing at the different levels through the design of their office buildings. And I was like, well, that sounds like an interesting research question. Does it really work? Like, do you share knowledge better if you're in a really cool building like a kindergarten, maybe? And then I went to this Academy of Management meeting, like one of the most important meetings in our field, and talking about this research. I get this group where we talk about new technologies, and I was like, well, actually, I think the future is not going to be so much co-located, but more distributed. And then I think it was a matter of, it's a matter of a second switch or a second switch in the times of the day, where I was like, okay, I have to talk this back with my advisors, but looking into what technologies and how technologies are going to change the way that teams collaborate and teams share knowledge is something that I find more interesting. Also, I'm very passionate about technology generally. Like, actually, maybe I have this on the enterprise. I'm also very passionate about, VR
VR.
and everything. So I think, yeah, this was just a fitted situation. And then I was also very lucky because my advisors at Bondordi, they had this connection to a very cool company in the Bay Area where I got to pitch my idea on my study. And that's how it all started.
Is it the first study conducted on job promotion, job advancement in distributed companies, distributed organizations, or were there others before?
No, that's a very good question. So back then, it's about 7 years ago, it was one of the studies that was bringing the awareness and bringing the career advancement topic into the globally distributed teams. Like a lot of people of research had been already started to go into the how people collaborate, what's so different when you're co-located with when you're remote, but looking more at conflict in teams, shared identity, communication, trust, all these very important issues. But there is not really so much on how do you get career promotions when you are not sitting in the same office with your boss. So actually, I didn't even go into the field researching that. That came as a follow-up with this beauty of qualitative research. But yeah, it was definitely one of the first studies. There were some studies that looked into the experimental phase of how, for example, impression management or networking are useful for career advancement, but those are either experimental or in normal teams, traditional teams. So I felt very happy to have found this sweet spot. And yeah, and also I should definitely mention there was this research from 2006, Anka Metiu, I think she was at INSEAD when she had this nice ethnography. She didn't really look at career promotion, but she did something similar. She had an ethnography looking at offshore teams. So teams, for example, that have people in India and in the US and engineers in India were trying to get work assigned to them from the higher status locations, so this from the United States. So this is a bit connected with career advancement, but not quite. However, I was definitely inspired by that study.
So the title of your thesis is Effective Collaboration in Globally Distributed Teams. But most of it talks about the virtual rat race. What's the connection between them? What did you find? Was it surprising?
True. And I love this question, because I was getting it a lot from my advisors as well. Like, why is it effective? Like, why can we advance with virtual rat race? And I think the key here is visibility. Like collaboration means working together towards a shared goal, when global collaboration means doing this globally. And what is career advancement basically? So this is like getting recognized for the work you do with a promotion. But in order to get recognized, basically to get noticed, you need visibility and in the way you work together towards that goal. So I think the locker here, the virtual rat race, the connection with this effective collaboration is definitely through visibility. Like people need to show that they are doing hard work in order to get promoted. And when you are sitting in an office with someone and like your colleagues working toward the same thing, they also see that you're there putting in the effort, even if maybe sometimes you have a bad day, sometimes you have a good day. That's normal, but they see you're there. However, if you are on Mars already and I'm on the Enterprise, we don't really talk to one another. We barely get a connection. Then it's kind of hard if I'm not making an effort to be here online, present, and really being here to collaborate with you. So I think what I meant with this effective collaboration is that you need to have to do certain strategic behaviors when you're globally distributed in order to be effective. And those are, sadly, being this online, always on, and showing really taking steps to make yourself visible in the team.
I want to take a step back just to understand the research. Tell me a bit the companies. You had 3 studies, right? If I'm correct in the PhD. Tell me a bit the companies that you have researched. How big were they? What kind of work they were doing? Just to put things a bit in context. And I also want to understand how they were functioning. Did they already have KPIs set or not? And a bit to what led to this virtual rat race, right? Why were they behaving like
Yeah.
this?
So this is a very good point, because what it does, it's important for the study because it's not really generalizable, because the companies I was looking at is at this Fortune 100 company, actually for the first and the last paper of the study. And this is one of the best companies to work for. It was back then, it had been for a few years. It still is in this top of best companies to work for. One of the largest networking technology companies, headquartered in the Bay Area. And they had this, for them, everything was just set to work. They had the technologies necessary. And if you're to think about 2012, when I started, right, like 8 years ago. So back then it was something quite modern, actually, and quite forward thinking, and like more like the future is here for them already. They didn't really have any technical issues, and everything was set out to work. So in a way, it was kind of like the closest to the perfect real life company you could go into and study virtual collaboration at that time, because of the entire technological things that were not an issue. Like other studies and other experiments that had looked into collaboration in distributed teams, mostly using MBA students, had this artificial setting, and maybe in real companies they really didn't have the performing tools to do it. So this company was very special in that respect. They were producing the highest quality of tools, and they had everything they needed to be successful. So you could really look at collaboration. How does this work when everything works well, technologically speaking?
So how does it work when everything works well, technologically speaking? Because everyone is aiming for that, right?
Right. And right now with the pandemic, I think this is getting even more hype than usually, because now we are forced, like companies actually had to switch to this from one day to another almost, and have to figure out how is it working. And now we do have the tools necessary to make it work. And well, the short answer is so, right? It's working through meetings. And that was probably my biggest surprise when I started doing this study, because what I did not expect to hear when I was asking, so how do you collaborate with your colleagues? You're located in the US, or in Asia, or in Europe. Like, how does collaboration look like in this distributed work? And they're like, well, we have meetings. And I was like, so how many meetings? Like, how does it look like? And then they would instantly just share their screen so I could see their calendars. And they had really minimum 70% of their time stuck up with meetings. And collaboration was going well, they said, through meetings. Just that it was going so well that this company had developed into a culture of meetings. And I think that is one trap of collaboration. So if you want to have good collaboration, you should pay attention to the meetings, right? Because it's a very important tool to have synchronous communication, right? And video collaboration, much more than just audio collaboration, definitely improves collaboration. But when you have too much of something, like anything, like the utility function, right? When you eat too many candies, then maybe you don't like them so much. When you have so many meetings, then you have to ask yourself, am I still being productive? Because what was going on there, and this is how I got into this, is actually because of the fact that they were having so many meetings, they really didn't have much time left to actually work. So when was work happening? Where was collaboration happening? So it was happening in meetings. And that was, to me, like, what? Like, so you're working a meeting right now, but like, I'm paying attention to you, you're paying attention to me, and we were working together towards a common goal. But things were going on back then was like, they were rarely on the video button. And when they were doing so, they were actually working on other things. So like maybe they had this screen over here, but maybe they had another laptop over here. But most often than not, there was no video, and they were doing a lot of other things, like surprising, even like, being on the toilet, or like working out, working on other projects. It was just
I'm curious, when you say this company was distributed, were parts of the company working in the office and then working distributed with other locations who were also in an office, or everyone was working from home, or partly from home, partly from the office? What was the setup?
Yeah, this is a really good point, because so I'm going to answer this question and then make a bit of a comparison with what's happening right now. So this company was very special in the sense that they were already thinking forward and thinking in like the future of work. How can we make remote fully work? In that sense, they were thinking of restructuring their physical space, so their buildings, maybe giving up some buildings, and see if this remote thing actually works. So what they did is actually they allowed teams to come and work from the office, but it was not encouraged. Also, they would mostly encourage collaboration at a different level. So interdepartmental collaboration, as in I'm from one department, you're from another one. We could sit together in the same office today. Well, then tomorrow, each of us can just take another desk at another floor. Or you could choose to work from home. And actually what happened was, like, as we can imagine, like people didn't really feel very comfortable, because maybe you have also different personality types, right? Like maybe I want to see some colleagues, I want to see some faces, and that's why I want to go to work, right? I'm more of an extrovert. And then what people started doing is they started marking their territories, like leaving a photo on a desk, that's mine, or not coming to the office at all. So this was one thing happening, and this was an experiment going on in the Bay Area. In other places, they still had the traditional collocated teams, even if, for example, I would just say maybe not collocated teams, collocated people, because there could be that you worked from the same team and you would be located in the same place, but it could also be that you're part of several other teams that are not located there. And then you could also at any time choose to work remotely. That was the beauty and exciting part of studying this company back then. But what I was saying is we see today happening with remote work is, I think right now, companies are forced to go remote fully. Like there is no one in the office. There is no one, no one there to just say, okay, there is this thing happening with the remote work and collocated work when we have them within the same company. For example, people who are remote might think that, well, the people in the office, maybe they exchange different things and I'm not part of this conversation and I can't really be there. I'm missing out. But when we're all on the same level, so what's happening right now, when everybody's going remote, then I think it's a bit better for remote workers or for people who are just onboarding a team maybe, and they would have been fully remote, but now they have the chance to be part of a team and everybody's online. Like I'm not missing out on anything right now. It's a water cooler and I'm here.
Yeah, it's what we discussed with actually a lot of remote first companies and even with Borg, who agrees with this, that it's either all remote or fully collocated, because the hybrid version where some people stay in the office and get exposure to higher level executives, it's way easier for them to get to be noticed and to get promoted. There's a play of politics and power, right? It can be an us versus them. We are in the office, they are at home. You might even forget to invite people who are at home. For sure, decisions can be made on the projects that they're working on when they're not there, because it's one to say to someone, hey, whenever we are in the office, when we go on a break, we never talk about work, right? It's not as easy to accomplish as it is to say it.
Exactly. And I think this is what you just said right now. This is what created this, what was the birth of the virtual rat race, actually, this entire thing. Because when you are not located in the same office, I'm remote, as a remote worker, you have to make so much more effort and so much more sacrifice to be on the same level with someone who's in the same office with the manager. And, the interesting thing is that managers don't always see this sacrifice, as in they see the sacrifice, but they're not really aware of the magnitude of the sacrifice. So I see that you're here, like attending this meeting at 10 p.m. your time. And yeah, that's great. Like you're super committed, you're hardworking, and I appreciate you. But they kind of, it's not because they don't want, it's like what we call cultural level theory. It's just because they are in this position, the higher up you are, the more abstract thinking you are. And so you're not looking at the same level of like, what does this mean for this person that they're actually here every day at 10 p.m. Maybe they have kids, they have to take them to bed, or maybe they're a morning person and they're not so productive at the end of the day. What actually makes virtual rat race exist, right? Like, this reinforces this vicious behavior of like you as a remote worker constantly trying to signal that I'm here and I'm as good as the other ones in the office. I'm just like not there to, hey, say hi over the coffee machine or like get lunch together with you. But I have to do so much more effort, and therefore I am at a higher chance of burning out.
That's what I wanted to ask. Can we go a bit through the actual results of the research? And afterwards we can go into the details, but I think it's really important to underline exactly your findings and then talk about the learnings and what we can do to maybe change that.
Exactly. So one of the main findings was, I was saying, with effective collaboration and career advancement, was that visibility is actually key to career advancement. And as much as it pains us, it's like there is a lot of other research from traditional teams, so teams located in the same office, that says that FaceTime is important. Like research by Kim Elsbach, we used a lot. And she was saying how FaceTime is really important because you do come across as more committed, and there's a lot of other research that says you get higher appraisals, you are more likely to get better promotions. And unfortunately, I think this is connected to a bit of an unconscious bias that leaders have, right? When you are there and they see you, it's almost unconscious. It's not like because they necessarily want to punish someone, right? It's just they see you, and then it's unconsciously saying you're present, you're more there, and
they know your name more. Maybe it's psychologically
exactly.
more simple.
Exactly.
Or cognitively more simple to recognize and see the link.
Exactly. So it's this unconscious attribution in the end, right? And this was one of the main findings, like visibility is the key to a career advancement. And even when a personal sacrifice is needed to accomplish that. Because as I was hinting out earlier, when you work so hard to get noticed, you unfortunately die trying. So this virtual rat race has this outcome more often than not of being burned out on the job. And this was one of the main findings of my research. We also found out that, for example, together with my colleague Rike, we had the second paper together where we had a multi-sided ethnography, this time looking at a company headquartered in Denmark, also a Fortune 500 company. And here we saw a different type of a behavior, like there's also, it's not just like, you can have the best technology and you maybe are not interested in getting promoted, but collaboration, maybe for collaboration to work and to be effective, you also really need to work hard for it. Just like in any relationship, in your work relationship, for it to happen and to be productive, you need to work at it. And then what we found here was that people have this preconceived assumptions, so their own beliefs of what virtual collaboration is and what it can do, which was a bit surprising. So we call them these implicit theories of virtual collaboration because, for example, people would say, yeah, you can't really develop relationships through virtual meetings. I can be present in more than one place at a time, or you can't have in-depth discussions in a virtual meeting. And we heard this over and over again, over like maybe like 40 interviews or so, or more actually, like 50 interviews. And we started seeing this pattern of like, okay, but how? Like, I don't know, like, I'm just sure. So like, what are you doing? Like, and just because, for example, I can't believe that I can develop relationship through virtual meetings, that's why maybe they were not even like paying attention or turning on their video. So this was also a kind of a like more like, wow, okay, this is happening, and you don't have to take it so lightly because, people maybe are used to being in a traditional team, and for them back then, at least, it was not so common to work remotely, and maybe they have 2-3 people remote. And then if you're anyway not gonna get to that point where you build a trust relationship with them, because you can't anyway over virtual meetings, that's what they said, right? They would not even try. And this is a very important thing to consider when you are working together across large time zone differences, or I mean, for even now remotely, like you can be on the same line. You have to really believe this can work out for it to work out. Maybe, I mean, it can be as simple as that. So that was one other finding. And then Bo also mentioned, this is one finding that he and Dorothy were really fascinated about, and also found exciting, was that actually the status of the location is what determines time that someone starts work. So the power center is very important. For example, people in California, they wake up at 8 a.m. That's maybe 5 or 6 p.m. in Europe, depending on where you are. And that means the person sitting in Europe, they will work the entire day until then, but then maybe they start having meetings 2 hours later, and then it's already 7 p.m. And then it's not only with Europe, that maybe that's a better case, but think about India, for example, or Australia, like for people, So this was also, time is up, everyone. time for going back to meetings. I found it like funny, sad, but this is also something that is connected to burnout and completes the picture of getting noticed and die trying, because why do you get up and attend that meeting at the end? Like, they are the power center, and why do you do it? Because you want to be seen, you are committed, and you don't want to be left out, right? So those were some of the key findings, I think.
And it was very painful for me to see when I read your paper that you actually discovered quite a few cases of burnout, and even people who maybe had 2 or 3 promotions along the way, but in the end decided to give up this kind of career and just settle down for a lower level job, so they don't have to do it all over again for every single promotion.
It's true. For me also, looking back then, I was coming from doing my research in Denmark. Denmark is well known for, putting a lot of emphasis on well-being and happiness, and
work-life balance.
Student, exactly. You don't really have this work-life balance, but still, you have a much better work-life balance than someone working in a virtual team, right? So when I went and I started this study, I was like hit, because people were working around 65 hours a week, and they were having no time off and no vacation. And I was like, okay, so when was the last time you had your vacation? And it's like, oh, but my manager doesn't take vacation, so I don't really want to take vacation. And I was, I was just, as an exploratory research, I was building in on this line as well, because I thought, okay, this is interesting. So you are trying to be a very productive worker. You're collaborating with all these people remotely, yet you work super long hours. You don't take days off. How do you pull it off? And you're stuck in meetings all the time. So that's when I got some, even now to think about it, I got some people confessing, or I don't even know if the confessing is the right word, but telling me about their struggles. And I remember this one guy, it was in his 50s or late 50s or so. And he said, you're very lucky if you have time to grab lunch. And oftentimes that lunch is just a Snickers bar in your drawer or something like that. And then another guy who was saying that at this stage, he had already been out and decided that, okay, I'm not going to do this to myself. But he had already been into this for 2 years, like 2 years going nonstop in this back-to-back meetings, always there, always present, to then realize that he had a small kid. The kid had grown up, so 2 years older, didn't really have any connection with his father. No, like his personal relationship with friends had severely deteriorated. His health had deteriorated. And then he had this realization, okay, this is really, why am I doing this? Like, why? What's the point? And then after having already gotten the promotions, he realized that, okay, I'm very happy the way I am. I'm going to talk to my manager and lay my case out there. So then he started having he was kind of like on purpose making himself remote to the fact that he did not really care to attend any more meetings. I mean, he completely reduced his meetings to the one that were completely necessary, and then focused more on having a balanced life. And he was also the one of telling me a lot about the fear of missing out, which is funny because now I got into this topic and I just want to keep saying connected to burnout as well still, but also the fear of missing out. You talk to people who are maybe just starting out their career, right? And they say, okay, well, I'm just going to do this. And I'm aware I have no time and I don't really meet my friends anymore and haven't had a Friday out since forever, but it's just going to pass. Like it's max 2 years and then I'll build my reputation and I will be ready to, have a more balanced work life. Then you talk to people midlife. They already have a beautiful career. They have had several promotions, but they still do it. And when you talk to them and they describe their work life, it's like they don't see the way out. That's like, it's this vicious circle. Like you just go and go and go and you don't see the way out. And then you talk to people who are really close to ending their career. Then some of them have had this realization and then feel pity for their younger colleagues because they think of them younger selves and what advice would you give your younger self? But then they still find it really hard to actually put a break on it. So I found only a few people in my interviews actually that had the power to escape, if I might say, burnout.
Is it a vicious circle? Is it something at the individual level, something that we need to stop as employees? Is it something that the organization has to stop?
Yes, those are really great questions. And I actually thought a lot about it. And I think part of it is because hearing those people talk was just so heartbreaking that I just thought I just wanted to do something right away. What can I do to help them? And then I realized, I really can't do anything. And the only people that can save themselves are themselves by having a shocker moment. Maybe, from my experiences talking to the other, some of the interviewees were like, these moments happen when either they had an important personal shock, like for example, a sad event in someone's life, someone that died, or someone was being left by their partner, or some personal event of a great magnitude. And then you realized exactly. And then you start reanalyzing your life. That's at a personal level. But of course, in an ideal world, you would like organizations to do something about it. And I think it's not so much on the individual shoulder, or at least it should not be my personal opinion, but maybe the organizations should think about ways in doing this. And maybe just, I don't know, but maybe something like just bringing awareness and raising awareness and then training leaders, coaching them to identify situations like this and make sure burnout is not in the cards. For example, maybe have a structured way of creating teams, in the sense don't create teams that have more than 3 hours time zone differences, because maybe then you are unwillingly making it so that some people will have burnout, or will have to because they will need to get noticed. Or just, if you notice someone sending emails late at night, take a step and talk to that person and tell them it is not necessary. But I think actually it all comes back to the organizations, and they need to know that once they train they coach their leaders and raise awareness into this topic, then that's the first step. And then also they need to make sure that remote employees feel valued and included and heard, so that they get the same type of advancement opportunities as people that are not remote. That's when we're still talking about remote and co-locating. I think when this is really not clear and they don't feel valued and they feel like they have to do the same type of effort like someone who is co-located, that's when the real problem starts happening.
For sure. I'm curious, because you are talking about the major companies that you've studied here. Did they have KPIs that they measured in each of the jobs? Did they really measure the outcomes of the work? And was this taken into consideration when they made the job advancements?
Yeah, so I didn't particularly look into it, but I did look into some internal collaboration reports. And from informal talks, I realized they do have it. I didn't look more into it. It was just surprising to know that even if there are certain KPIs, like you would measure people based on their output, but it would still matter, whether that person, like you can promote people on different projects, right? Like there are high status projects and low status projects. So that was one thing that was coming into play. The other interesting thing that I saw in one of those internal reports was that they were acknowledging the fact that networking is important and you need to be present and to show face. So, it was a bit of a paradox for me, right? Like on one side, you're saying that, yeah, once you do your good job, you get advancement, right? But then you also need to be there and make sure you network so that you are seen. So that made the question, okay, what type of career advancement is this? Like, are there different levels? And while I didn't get into it, I think this is like really interesting for further research.
Can this be, I'm not saying this as an excuse, can this be evolutionary as well? Because at some point we are social beings. We did learn to build trust more by seeing the face of others rather than by collaborating remote. Is this just a phase and we have to go through it to really learn how to communicate asynchronously, how to record meetings and re-listen to them, how to say no to various promotions or even say no to meetings and say no to our bosses because there are so many other opportunities that we can take out there for remote work and for everything else, right? Is this just a period in time in which this is happening because we evolved to do so, or it's more learned behavior?
This is a very interesting question. I would think in a way it is evolutionary if we're to think about the technology, right? Like 20 years ago, technology was starting to kick in and we had flexible work time. Actually, I just remembered there was this study from 2002. They were saying, okay, people are very excited because the 9-to-5 traditional workplace is done. And then you have the flexible work time. So no more rat race. But then it actually happened that the rat race just moved into the virtual rat race, right? So in a way, you could say it's evolutionary thinking of the technology. The technology has evolved to such a way that now we can do it. And if before this pandemic, companies wouldn't think that it's possible, or they maybe wouldn't even want to go that way, now you can see that there are some jobs that can be done remotely. And I do believe that some of them can be done. I just think that you should think really well before going into it, because you need to be very clear in what types of jobs, like when you have too much interdependence between team members, and then maybe it's not a good idea that you have this remotely. But when there are jobs that you can do independently, you don't need to rely on other people, then work from anywhere you want. So in that sense, yeah. But I also think it's a learned behavior, right? Like we adapt, like we have adapted for centuries, and maybe some of us haven't had the technology that we have right now 20 years ago. And the thing about now, we also talk about digital nomads, like definitely a learned behavior. Now I'm so learned to this technology that I can work on the enterprise right now. It's not easy.
It feels good, right?
It feels good, like learning by doing. So I would think maybe it's a mix.
For sure. And then I do see it in companies. I saw it in my old company. I felt it on my own skin because I was one of the first to move working remotely. And I felt it was such a great perk that was offered to me that I had to put in the extra effort. And at that point, because I was one of the very few who did it, no one really cared if I joined the meeting or not. They mostly forgot about me. So I had to put in the extra effort to be there. But it is a very special case, right? I was, for the last company that I worked for in France, I was really literally their only person working remotely. So one person in 20,000, you're thinking, okay, whatever.
One in 20,000? Wow,
yes.
that is really extreme.
Yes, fully remotely, right? They had their salespeople who would have to be in the office 2 or 3 days a week, but the rest they were out on the field taking care of the customers. right? So you can call that remote work if you want. They were some of the pioneers in the company who did that. But fully working remotely, it was just me. Not that I actually needed to be in an office. I didn't.
But it's interesting because I hear you. Like, sorry, you're just saying that you actually you worked hard to actually be there. Like, had you not worked hard, it would have been like maybe you were not even there. You would have been invisible, right?
Yeah, for sure. You have to work to. I didn't necessarily want to get noticed, but because I was working on transformation and change projects, you really need to be present so the others can feel you are next to them, supporting them to go through the transformation, right? Yes, and you can do that either by traveling or by really participating in meetings and being there. Ioana, I'm curious, what can we do to change this?
Yeah.
Is there any advice that we can think of, you or together, that we can give people so they can get out of this rat race or replace this meeting behavior, forever being in meetings behavior, with something else that still gets them the visibility?
Most companies should ask, right, before going remotely. And now it's the right time to ask them. And as I was mentioning earlier, I think more than individuals, it should be something done at the company level. I think when you are in an organization that is really dedicated to making sure remote employees feel included and feel valued, then it's the first step forward. And then also, I think what happens is that leaders themselves are not really maybe prepared to lead a virtual team, right? So how do you make that included? How do you ensure that the time zone selected is good for everyone? Maybe you should have a rotating schedule, or maybe you should just ask your team members and see how do they feel. Like, are they okay with this? What would they change? Do a little bit of an inquiry within your team and start asking people. So there's a bit of qualitative research, just investigating inside your own company to see what would they suggest. And I think actually just raising awareness is a really important thing, because this is then also connected to well-being. And I think one of the very big dangers of remote collaboration is the loss of mental well-being and physical well-being, changing your lifestyle, being online late at night or staying up super late at night, working throughout the entire day, and then again at night. So actions like, for example, minimizing time zone differences, as I mentioned, ideally you would not want to have more than 3 hours time zone differences, because then we have teams that work together on the independent, then that's not a good idea. However, when you have someone working in a way that they can do the work during the day and then in the evening they can hand over to someone else who's on a different time zone, that's like maybe the traditional 24-hour work around the clock company style. So then you should really think about what type of jobs, what are the roles, like happening, and then be able to design them in a way that everybody is included. And then, of course, I would advocate for better work policies altogether, like mandatory maximum work hours and mandatory vacation, and develop and exercise empathy with team members. So, and then why not lead by example? Not working after hours as a leader and not encouraging this kind of behavior from their employees, and take action whenever you see someone doing it. Whenever you schedule a meeting, really think twice if that meeting is very important. Like, is this being necessary? And being aware of the time. So like even maybe tweaks. I know that, for example, Slack, that tell you the time zone of your colleague, and they also, you can get alerts if you are working, for example, too late at night. But yeah, and so this is more on the organization side. Like, what can organizations do? I believe like just raising awareness, training their leaders, coaching them into becoming more empathetic, and more like just training them into remote work, basically making them aware of the dangers and the sacrifices that go into this type of work, right? And then for remote workers, well, I think as a remote worker, if like in your case, you were the only one, for you, maybe it was harder to bring up certain things because you are in a in a special position. We see that happening sometimes with when you are only one remote person, but maybe it would still be okay to raise concerns and about workload and burnout in a timely manner in their one-on-ones. So clearly communicating with managers of the work that goes into showing this constant commitment and constant online presence and what it actually means for them. And then being mindful that promotions come at a higher cost than expected. So they might get trapped in this vicious cycle of constantly signaling hard work and being available to just ultimately be really unhappy with the final results. Like you think you want this, but then when you finally get it, you might be surprised. And then I would maybe one last thing is that awareness of the inherent power imbalance between them and the ones located in the main office. So I think sometimes the people located in the main office fail to see the sacrifice that goes into balancing this kind of power, you know. So just you as a remote, like maybe when you're not located in the main office, if you yourself are aware, it's not something done on purpose. It's just that people are simply not aware. So this again goes into coaching both leaders and raising awareness into for the individuals as well.
What I really want to do, Ioana, is maybe a shout out to GitLab. I'm not sure if you've heard about them, but they are only 1,300 strong right now. They are fully remote. But what they are doing is exactly the kind of behaviors like as an organization that you've mentioned, right? Meetings, everyone participates in meetings. Exactly. Only when they have to. Meetings are recorded. They are even so transparent that you have all of them on YouTube. So you can actually go and check them out, and you can play them at a faster speed when no one is listening, right? And you can pass all the moments that are not important in that meeting. So that's a way faster way to get everyone up to speed. They also have a handbook where everything that is decided and every kind of process or procedure or policy is already stated there. So anyone who joins and everyone who works anywhere in the world, they know exactly how decisions are made based on what and how in that particular moment. And if anyone makes a proposal to change it, unless it's changed in the handbook, it doesn't happen, right? Slack can only be used for a certain amount of time. So all the behaviors that you mentioned, they're promoting this, and they have been quite a thought leader in this past months with Darren Murph, their head of remote. So if anyone is listening, that's a company to follow in terms of practices.
Wow, I'm very happy to hear about this. Thanks for mentioning.
I'll share with you if you want a few of the things that they've put out there. Very, very nice. They even have a training right now. I think it's on Udemy or Coursera. Coursera, if I'm not wrong, for remote management, and you can take it for free. Or if you want to get the certification, it's very cheap as well, €40 or something like this. And it's a very good course.
Oh, that's a great initiative for all the leaders who are looking for advice in this time, right?
Yes, and it's very well created as well. I was wondering, do you think I had a few things in mind to still for an individual, right? To still get that visibility. And I'm asking you as an expert in this and someone who has studied this, do you think this would work? So for example, if you're not so much in meetings, but you really make sure that whatever comes out as work is of good quality. Whenever you are in a meeting, you truly pay attention, you listen, and you communicate well. And over-communicate remotely always helps. To somehow always share knowledge and be the go-to person and network more and help other people connect so you can be the link between people. And even if you're not in the meetings, would this increase your visibility and maybe the reputation that you have with other peers and even with other managers? Because you do all these things, you're not exactly visible like we are right now. And I'm not seeing your face, but I know that behind the curtains, you are doing all of this. Would this help in any way?
This is actually a really interesting point. There's research going in this direction, actually, because yes, the short answer is yes. But then you run into the next problem. So you become a central node in the network, right? Because then you are going to be the knowledge expert. So everybody's going to want to talk with you, or maybe they will want to have some more, okay, I need to know more about that. And then maybe you didn't want this to happen, but then you are suddenly popular. I mean, that is a good thing for career advancement, right? But it can be a bad thing for your time. However, if you do this and then you make all the information is put out there, it's stored in the knowledge repositories that you have, then yeah, maybe it wouldn't be so painful at the end.
And I'm also thinking maybe it's not as empty of a goal.
It can be an interesting alternative.
And it's maybe you have a purpose, right?
Exactly.
At that point. And it builds more into that rather than just having an empty goal of just being present in meetings that you don't have to be present to. Maybe.
Exactly.
Okay.
So like definitely an alternative. And then maybe you are actually the domain expert and you are actually becoming even better at what you're doing by doing this type of research and putting it out there. So why not try it out? You definitely have higher chances of becoming a network node.
And being noticed for sure. Is there something that maybe I didn't ask you and you wanted to mention about your research? Or some words that you would like to leave everyone with so they can learn something from this and model the right behavior forward? It's
a personal exercise for everyone to just be grounded and think about why you're doing this. Always keep the curious mindset and mindfulness and empathy towards the others. And just think that everybody's going through the same thing. But actually, no, just I was starting to... and I...
Așa se întâmplă, știi, când trebuie să le faci.
So one last advice I wanted to give is that awareness and mindfulness of the fact that promotions can come at a higher than expected cost, and the sacrifice that maybe one does weekly, that week turns into a second week and a third week, and then it becomes a daily sacrifice, that can maybe have a much higher cost than expected. And it's not always with a happy ending. So this was one of my most surprising findings, that people are actually not so happy with that promotion as compared to how happy they were before. So it maybe matters how much time and how long do you want to be in this race in the end.
Ioana, thank you very, very much for today.
Julia, it's been a real pleasure.
Same here. Thank you very much for your insights, and thank you for taking us through your research. It's really important and it's very, very interesting, and it is unique. And I think the findings and the learnings that we can all take, so we can actually really be, as you said, mindful and design the workplace and design the way we work and how we collaborate with each other with a bit more focus, will not hurt when we are remote.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having this friendly chat over research. I'm very passionate about this topic, as you can see. I get all pumped up. But I'm very excited to see where this is going and how the pandemic will make this go further. As we said, evolution and learning. I'm curious, how is this going to work further?
Yeah, now we see the learning bit. Yes.
Exactly.
For sure. Thanks so much.